So like many of us, I was hoping that the 2021 E3 would bring us some Xenoblade Chronicles announcements, but to many of our disappointments, nothing was revealed at all during the Nintendo E3 conference, which raised the question, when are we going to hear something, and when's the next Xenoblade game coming? And that's the question that I'm going to answer throughout this video. But a quick spoiler for the end of the video, it's probably not coming this year. Let's first begin by looking at the past of Monolith Soft with the previous Xenoblade games. On screen now you should be able to see the release dates from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the original, to Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that came out mid last year. And simply as we can see via the release date, there is quite a difference and a jump between the initial Xenoblade Chronicles games to the newer ones, which gives us the idea that Monolith Soft is starting to speed up production of the Xenoblade Chronicles series, which for all Xenoblade fans is a very, very good thing. But if we have a look at it in a little bit more detail, there's a 5-year difference between the initial Xenoblade Chronicles 1 release and Xenoblade Chronicles X, which in this circumstance can be considered a sequel. Please keep in mind as well that Xenoblade 3DS, Xenoblade Tourner and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition will have required a shorter development cycle due to the fact that both Xenoblade Chronicles 3DS and Definitive Edition are the same games as Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and Xenoblade Chronicles Tourner was a smaller DLC for the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 game. This means that the development team at Monolith Soft didn't have to spend as much time in the research and development phase of making a game, as Xenoblade Chronicles 1 already existed at that point, and they could simply make it accessible to port over for the 3DS version and remake and rebuild the assets and programming for the Definitive Edition. So the amount of time required to develop and make those games would have been less than a brand new Xenoblade Chronicles series game. This we will need to keep in mind as well, depending if the next Xenoblade game is going to be a sequel to the series or a possible remake of Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Switch, which everybody always seems to be asking for. We also need to take into account that with these release dates, Monolith Soft wasn't purely ever working on all of these Xenoblade games. Monolith Soft is a company that regularly tends to assist Nintendo with the development of other games. The most widely known one is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in 2017, which between 50 to 60% of Monolith Soft staff was assisting with that game instead of working on Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in 2016. And therefore, knowing that roughly around that time that the company's size was around 100 members of staff, this left only 40 people working on the development of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Not that you'd be able to tell, considering the quality of the game. But Monolith Soft throughout all the years has been assisting with other games, and we can see this very clearly. And this could be part of the reason why there is such a delay between the initial Xenoblade and Xenoblade Chronicles X, as within that period, Monolith Soft could have been working on between 4 to 6 games whilst also attempting to develop Xenoblade Chronicles X, a much larger scale game than the initial Xenoblade. Monolith Soft is currently working on the second installment of Breath of the Wild, which is one of the reasons that development of the next Xenoblade game could be slowing. Fortunately, in this past year, Monolith Soft has had around 40 vacancies, looking to expand the company to get more support for their section of gaming, which will include Xenoblade Chronicles. To put this into context, as I've just mentioned, in 2016/17 for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the total size of the company of Monolith Soft was 100 members of staff roughly. However, now Monolith Soft are nearing 300 members of staff, with as recent as I can find on Google being 272, meaning quite realistically more than double the staff will more than likely be working on the future Xenoblade games, which is very, very good news for everybody, considering Breath of the Wild 2 will be even better and there'll be even much more love and effort put into the future Xenoblade Games. If the company is split up the same way it was for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, then this will mean around 110 people are currently working on the next Xenoblade game. Keyword though, if. But there's one final thing that we have to keep in mind before we guess a date, and that's the thing that everybody's bored of now: COVID-19. The virus has drastically affected workforces all over the world and will have undoubtedly affected the development of the next Xenoblade game. By how much is up in the air, however, Japan specifically over the last 2 years has had quite a few spikes of the virus, and that is where Monolith Soft is primarily based as a company. So it's safe to assume that the overall progress of the game has been delayed slightly via the virus, which we'll need to take into consideration for our predictions. And thus, let's answer the question of when it's going to be revealed and released. Personally, I believe we will hear something about the next Xenoblade game around the end of this year, say between October and January next year, providing that development started on this game immediately after the completion of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I think it's pretty likely that the development team will have a good percentage of the game finalised by this point, and they'll have something to be able to show us all and get us hyped. With that in mind, we were probably a little bit too eager to think we were going to get an announcement for this E3. And with the announcement of at the end of this year, I believe the game will come out sometime around Christmas the year afterwards, meaning that there will be a year roughly in the development of the game between announcement and release. Now this might seem like a long time, however it's actually roughly the same schedule for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which was announced and revealed at the end of 2016 and later released on December 1st in 2017. So I believe it's pretty likely that we won't be playing the next Xenoblade game for a little while longer. This seems like the most likely release schedule to me, taking into consideration all of the crazy things that have happened over the last couple of years. And to be honest, if I'm wrong either way, then I wouldn't mind. Having the game sooner is just better for everybody, and if the game takes a little longer with the extra development team, it will be the best Xenoblade game by far. So all we can do now is have a little patience. Please, no copyright. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed this information video. If you have enjoyed and you want to stay up to date with all the latest Xenoblade news, tips and tricks, and any other Xenoblade related topics, then hit that red subscription button down below. Until next time guys, peace!